I've been married to Lisa for 6 years. We met through mutual friends at a party and there was an instant connection. At first, everything seemed perfect. We shared the same interests, laughed at the same jokes, and even had similar career aspirations. I was working at a mid-sized tech company and she was in HR, which I thought was a good match. However, over the last year, I started noticing signs that something was off. Lisa had become distant. She would often come home late, claiming it was because of work commitments. I noticed she was glued to her phone, texting and giggling like a teenager. My gut told me something was wrong, but I brushed it off. After all, we were a team, right? I trusted her. But trust began to erode. I saw how she would change the subject whenever I asked about her day or her work. The laughter that used to fill our home slowly faded, replaced by awkward silences. One night, I was going through the shared drive on our home computer to find an old document. While searching, I came across some strange files. Titles like Weekend Plans and Meeting Notes caught my attention. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. It was a series of emails between Lisa and my HR manager, Mark. My heart raced as I scrolled through the exchanges. They were planning to meet while I was out of town for a work conference. I felt sick. My mind screamed, no, it can't be. As I continued reading, the conversations became more explicit. They were joking about their secret rendezvous and how much fun they had last weekend. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My world came crashing down in an instant. How could she do this to me, to us? I shut my laptop and stared at the wall, a million thoughts racing through my head. The next day I confronted her. The look on her face when I asked about Mark was one of pure shock, but there was also a hint of something else, guilt. Or was it just a well-rehearsed act? "What are you talking about?" she said, rolling her eyes. "You're being ridiculous." But I wasn't being ridiculous. I had proof. I laid everything out for her, the emails, the plans, everything. The color drained from her face, and for a moment I thought she might actually confess. Instead, she went into defensive mode. "You're reading too much into it. Mark, been a great help at work. You know how stressful things have been." Her excuses were pathetic, and I could see right through her lies. I felt a fire ignite inside me. I didn't want to just accept this betrayal. I could feel the anger boiling, and I knew I had to take action. How could she betray me with someone I worked with? Someone I trusted. The thought of it made my blood boil. I had a decision to make. Let it go or make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. The emotional roller coaster I was on felt relentless. I was heartbroken and infuriated. I went from disbelief to anger, then sadness, and finally to a grim determination. I should have fought for my marriage, but I couldn't see a way forward with someone who had so easily thrown it away. It was time to plan my next move. I couldn't just sit back and allow her to get away with this. If she thought she could walk all over me without repercussions, she was sorely mistaken. I was going to make sure that Mark felt the weight of his betrayal too. I had been wronged and I was ready to turn the tables. I can't lie, it felt good to have a plan. I was tired of being the victim. I wanted to regain my power. I gathered my thoughts and decided to take control of the situation. I was going to make sure Lisa and Mark both paid for their betrayal. Little did I know, this would set off a chain of events that would change everything. It was hard to focus on anything else. The anger I felt was consuming, but I channeled it into something productive. I decided I was going to gather as much information as I could about Mark, my wife's lover, and my HR manager. I spent the next couple of days doing some digging. I kept my distance from Lisa, who was acting as if nothing had happened, going about her day-to-day life like she hadn't just shattered mine. I started by talking to colleagues at work. I casually brought up Mark in conversations, trying to gauge what others thought. Of him, the feedback was mixed. Some praised his work ethic, while others described him as cocky and self-serving. I found out he had a history of inappropriate behavior with female employees, which made my blood boil even more. It was clear this guy had a pattern of using his position to exploit others. Then I turned my attention to the HR department itself. I reached out to one of my trusted coworkers, Jen, who had worked closely with Mark. I knew Jen well enough that I could confide in her without raising any suspicions. Over lunch, I mentioned how I felt about Mark's management style and how it was affecting morale. Jen was quick to nod in agreement. You know, he's been walking a fine line lately. Some of the things I've heard, she trailed off, looking around to make sure no one was listening. That was all the opening I needed. I pressed her for more details. She mentioned a few complaints that had been filed against him, but nothing had been done. I felt the pieces starting to fall into place. If I could compile enough evidence against Mark, I might be able to get him fired. And since Lisa was his accomplice in all of this, I was determined to make sure she faced the consequences too. I started documenting everything. The emails, the times Lisa was out late, the conversations I'd overheard. I spent hours compiling a dossier of evidence. I even created a timeline to illustrate their affair. It was meticulous. I knew HR would take this seriously if I presented them with solid proof. One night after Lisa went to bed, I stayed up late, preparing myself for the awful conversation I would eventually need to have with HR. I didn't want to wait too long. I needed to act before they had a chance to cover their tracks. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I thought about what I was about to do. Sure, it was a bitter pill to swallow, but I wouldn't let them destroy me without a fight. A week later, I gathered all my documents and made my way to HR. My heart raced as I entered the office. I couldn't help but feel like I was walking into a lion's den. I met with a woman named Claire who had been there for years. She was generally well respected in the company and had a reputation for being straight to the point. Claire, can I talk to you about something sensitive?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, what's on your mind?" she replied, eyeing me with curiosity. I laid it all out, presenting my evidence methodically. I watched her expressions change from confusion to concern as she glanced through the emails and notes I had compiled. By the time I finished, Claire looked up at me, her eyes wide. "This is serious, and I can't promise anything will happen overnight, but we'll take it from here." I felt a rush of satisfaction. I had done something. I had taken back control. But as I left the HR office, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was this really the right move? Would Lisa be devastated? I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, and the way she had tossed aside our marriage without a second thought. Back home, Lisa was in a great mood, completely unaware of what was brewing. She greeted me with a kiss which felt hollow. I wanted to tell her everything, to watch the shock wash over her face, but I held back, biding my time. I needed to see how deep this rabbit hole really went. I'd give it a week, maybe two, and then I'd confront her again. She'd need to answer for what she had done, and I was determined to make that happen. The days stretched out, and each time I saw Lisa, I felt a mix of anger and sorrow. I was a man on a mission, but the emotional turmoil was still there, gnawing at me. I could see how she was starting to become more defensive, and I knew that her facade wouldn't hold up forever. My plan was in motion now, and I could feel the tension in the air. I knew I couldn't wait too long to confront her again. The revenge I sought was drawing closer, and I had to be ready for her reaction when the truth finally came crashing down. The day of reckoning was approaching fast. The week crawled by, each day feeling like an eternity. I kept my interactions with Lisa as normal as possible, but every time I saw her smile or heard her laugh, it made my blood boil. It was infuriating to think she was living her life carefree while I was planning my revenge. I was caught in a tidal wave of emotions: rage, sadness, betrayal. But mostly, it was a deep-rooted determination to make her face the consequences of her actions. Then came the day of reckoning. I received a text from Claire, the HR rep, saying they had begun investigating my claims. It was the moment I had been waiting for, but it was also terrifying. If they uncovered everything I had gathered, Lisa would be brought in for questioning. I knew the truth would eventually come out, but I had mixed feelings about how this would unfold. That night I went home and found Lisa sprawled out on the couch, watching TV. She glanced up and smiled. "Hey, I was just thinking about ordering some dinner. Want to join me?" I feigned a smile in response. "Sure, let's do it." Inside, I was a storm of emotions. As we ordered food, I couldn't help but scrutinize every little thing she said, every little movement. Was she nervous? Did she feel guilty? Part of me wanted to scream. at her to shake her and make her confess, but I held it together. It wasn't time yet. After dinner, we settled in for a movie. I felt the distance between us growing, almost palpable. Lisa kept glancing at her phone, probably texting Mark. It made me sick. I had to come up with a way to keep her focused on me, away from whatever lies she was spinning to him. As the credits rolled, I decided to bring up a casual conversation. "So, how's work been treating you? I heard Mark got some significant projects underway." She hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting toward her phone before she answered. "Oh, just the usual. Mark is doing his thing, keeping everyone busy." She was too casual, too rehearsed. My gut twisted. "Busy, huh? I hope he's treating you well," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Of course, he's always been supportive," she replied, but her tone was off. There was a hint of defensiveness that I couldn't ignore. I took a deep breath, knowing that I needed to remain calm. I've been thinking about the changes around the office lately. Seems like there's a lot of restructuring happening." Lisa looked at me, her brow furrowing. "Yeah, well, that's just how it goes. HR is always changing things up." I leaned in, testing the waters. "What if I told you I heard some things from Claire that made me wonder about Mark?" Her expression shifted, and I seized the opportunity. "I heard he's not exactly the best when it comes to maintaining professional boundaries." Lisa's eyes widened, and she quickly shot back. "What do you mean?" I knew that I was treading dangerous waters, but I pressed on. "Just that people have been talking and maybe even filing complaints against him. It seems like he might not be as admirable as you think." She reacted defensively. "Don't start with that. Mark is a good guy. You're just being paranoid." At that moment, I realized she was more invested in defending him than she was in our relationship. It stung, but it also fueled my resolve. I was ready for the truth to come crashing down. I just needed to wait for the right moment. That night, as I lay in bed, I went through all the scenarios in my head. I imagined confronting her with all the evidence, watching her face as she realized there was no way out. It would feel good to see that look of betrayal on her face, the same one I wore every day since discovering her affair. The following day, I received another text from Claire. They had called Lisa in for questioning, and I felt a surge of excitement. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I knew I had to stay calm and collected. If Lisa was confronted with the evidence, she'd either confess or come up with some elaborate excuse. Either way, it would be a step toward the closure I desperately needed. When I got home that evening, I found Lisa pacing the living room, a look of panic on her face. "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "Nothing, just work stuff," she replied, but I could see through her facade. "Did something happen with Mark?" I pressed, trying to keep my voice steady. She narrowed her eyes, suspicion etched across her face. "Why would you ask that?" I shrugged, maintaining my calm. "Just curious. You seemed a bit anxious." She fidgeted, looking away. "I'm fine, really, just tired." It was almost laughable how obvious her lies were. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I knew everything. But I held my tongue, waiting for the moment when the truth would come tumbling out. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, lost in my thoughts about what was going to happen next. Lisa finally went to bed, and I lay awake, thinking about the life we had built, now crumbling around us. I had come this far, and I wasn't turning back. I wanted my revenge, and I was ready for it. The confrontation was coming, and I would not be the one to back down. The truth would hurt her, and it would hurt Mark too. They both deserved it. With the pieces in place, all I had to do was wait for the storm to break. And when it did, I would be standing there to watch it all unfold. The following day started with the kind of tension that was almost electric. I woke up earlier than usual, my mind racing with anticipation. I had a few errands to run before Lisa got home from work, and I knew I had to stick to my plan. I had to prepare for the confrontation I had been dreading yet anticipating. My first stop was a cafe near my office. I met with Jen for a quick coffee, and I could see the look of concern on her face as soon as I sat down. "You look stressed," she said, taking a sip of her latte. "I am. Things are about to get messy," I replied, glancing around to make sure no one was eavesdropping. "Did you hear anything after I went to HR?" She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "I heard they called Lisa in for questioning, a lot of whispers going around the office. People are shocked." "Good," I said. She needs to feel the weight of her choices. Jen nodded, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. You know, if she's been lying and cheating, she deserves to face the music. Just be careful. You don't want this to blow up in your face. Trust me, I've thought this through. I just need to stick to my guns, no matter how tough it gets. After our conversation, I felt a surge of confidence. I had support, and it made me feel less alone in this chaotic storm. I returned home, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew Lisa would be back soon, and the weight of the confrontation loomed over me like a dark cloud. When she finally walked through the door, I could see the anxiety etched on her face. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, trying to sound upbeat but failing miserably. "Just the usual. How about you?" I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Busy. HR had me in for a meeting and it was just all over the place." I forced myself to feign concern. "Oh, what was it about?" She hesitated, and I could see the fear in her eyes. "Just some restructuring stuff, you know how it is." I took a deep breath. "Lisa, we need to talk." She froze, her expression shifting from anxiety to something defensively combative. "What do you mean?" "Let's not play games. I know about you and Mark." Her face went pale, and it was clear the facade was crumbling. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, but there was a tremor in her voice that betrayed her. "I have proof, Lisa. The emails, the texts, everything. You can't deny it anymore." Her eyes widened as she realized I wasn't bluffing. "You went through my things," she said, the indignation rising in her voice. "I went through what was necessary to find the truth. You've been lying to me, and I won't let that go unchallenged." She crossed her arms, her expression shifting from shock to anger. "This is ridiculous. You're just making accusations without any basis." I couldn't believe her audacity. "Accusations? You have no idea how many people have seen you two together. I've heard enough to know that this isn't just a misunderstanding." "Maybe I have been distant," she admitted, her voice lowering, "but it's not what you think. Mark has been a mentor to me. You're just insecure. Don't you dare turn this around on me." I shouted, the anger bubbling over. "This isn't about me, it's about you and your choices. You've betrayed our marriage, and I deserve to know why." "Why do you even care? You're acting like I'm the worst person in the world." "Because you are," I shot back. "You've been lying to my face, and I won't just stand here and let you deflect responsibility. You think this is going to blow over, you think you'll get away with it." A silence fell between us, the weight of the confrontation hanging in the air. I could see her mind racing as she searched for an escape route. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for it to happen. I got caught up in things." "Caught up? You think that's an excuse?" "You didn't just get caught up in an affair, you made a choice. You chose him over me." The intensity of my words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She sank into the couch, clearly at a loss for how to respond. "I never meant to hurt you," she said softly, her voice cracking. At that moment I felt a mixture of sadness and anger. "Well, you did, and now you'll face the consequences of your actions." I stood up, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. "I'm done playing nice. I'm going to make sure Mark pays for what he did too. You both deserve it." I turned to leave the room, and as I walked away, I could hear her voice behind me pleading for me to stay. But there was nothing she could say to change my mind. I had made my decision, and the path ahead was clear. That night, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had confronted the source of my pain, and now it was time to execute the final pieces of my plan. I was going to make sure both Lisa and Mark faced the repercussions of their betrayal. The next day, I returned to HR with all my evidence and the determination to see this through. I was ready to end this chapter of my life and turn the page towards something new. It was time for my revenge, and nothing could stand in my way. The day I walked back into HR, I felt a mix of adrenaline and purpose. I had spent the night organizing my thoughts and preparing for the confrontation I was about to initiate. I was resolute. It was time to ensure that Lisa and Mark faced the consequences of their actions. I wanted them to feel the impact of their betrayal just as deeply as I did. As I entered the HR office, Claire was waiting for me. She had a serious look on her face, and I could tell that the investigation was already making waves. "I appreciate you coming in," she said, her voice steady. "We've contacted Lisa and Mark regarding your claims, and we need to have a thorough discussion about everything." I nodded, feeling a sense of vindication. "Good. They need to understand that their actions don't just affect me, they affect the entire workplace." Claire led me to a conference room and I took a seat, feeling the weight of what was about to transpire. I didn't have to wait long. Lisa walked in first, her expression a mixture of anger and confusion. She glanced at me and I could see the flash of panic behind her eyes. "Why am I here?" she demanded, folding her arms across her chest defensively. "Because I brought evidence of your affair with Mark," I replied, my voice firm. Before she could retort, Mark entered the room looking smug, as though he believed nothing could touch him. The moment he saw both of us in the room, his expression shifted to one of surprise. "What's going on here?" "Have a seat, Mark," Claire instructed, gesturing to the empty chair. The tension in the room skyrocketed as Mark took his seat, eyeing both Lisa and me with suspicion. "I'm here to discuss the allegations against you," Claire continued, her tone no nonsense. "We've received serious claims about inappropriate conduct involving both of you." Lisa shot me a look of anger, but I remained unfazed. I had come too far to let her intimidate me. "Allegations? This is ridiculous," Mark scoffed, leaning back in his chair as if he was above it all. Claire remained composed. "We've gathered evidence that suggests otherwise, including communications between you two." I watched as Lisa's face blanched, the realization hitting her that her betrayal was about to be laid bare for all to see. "Evidence?" she echoed, her voice trembling. "Emails, texts, and witness accounts. It paints a clear picture of inappropriate behavior," Claire said, maintaining her professional demeanor. I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction as I watched the color drain from Lisa's face. "You can't do this," she shouted, panic rising in her voice. "I didn't cheat on him. Mark was just being supportive." "Supportive," I interjected, unable to hold back. "Look where that support led you. You betrayed everything we built together." Mark, trying to regain control of the situation, attempted to downplay everything. "This is just workplace gossip. You can't believe everything you hear." Claire held up her hand, silencing him. "I assure you this is not gossip. We will conduct a full investigation, and based on our findings there will be consequences." Lisa shifted in her seat, her bravado cracking. But I didn't think it would turn into this. I thought it was just harmless fun." "Harmless?" I shot back incredulously. "You think cheating on your husband is harmless? You have no idea how much this hurts me." Claire then turned to Mark, her voice unwavering. "You're in a position of power, and that power has been abused. We take these matters seriously, and your conduct will be reviewed." Mark's confidence faltered as he realized the gravity of the situation. "This is all a misunderstanding. I never meant to." "Save it," Claire said, cutting him off. "Your excuses won't protect you from the consequences. We'll schedule a follow-up meeting with both of you as soon as we gather more information." With that, Claire dismissed them, and I watched as both Lisa and Mark left the room, their faces a mixture of anger and fear. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. I had finally taken a stand, and I wasn't going to back down. When I returned home that evening, there was an overwhelming heaviness in the air. Lisa waited for me, her eyes red from crying. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice shaky. "I did," I replied, my tone firm. "You made your choices, and now you have to deal with the fallout." "But I'm sorry," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted it to go this far. I thought I could keep it separate from us." "Separate?" I laughed bitterly. "You can't compartmentalize infidelity. You broke my trust, and now you'll face the consequences. It's time for you to understand the weight of your actions." "I'll fix this, I swear," she sobbed, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. "Fix it? How? By pretending it never happened. I can't trust you anymore, Lisa. You need to face what you've done." The conversation spiraled into more accusations and blame, and by the end of it I felt even more exhausted. I wasn't sure if I could salvage our marriage, but one thing was for certain: I was no longer the victim. I had taken control, and I wasn't going to let her off the hook that easily. In the following days, the investigation unfolded. Rumors swirled around the office, and I could see both Lisa and Mark's reputations beginning to crumble. I was filled with a sense of vindication, but there was also that lingering sadness. I had never wanted any of this. I just wanted a faithful partner. As the dust began to settle, both Lisa and Mark were called in for a final meeting with HR, and I braced myself for the aftermath. Whatever came next, I knew I was ready to face it. I had learned that sometimes you have to fight back when someone tries to take everything from you. The final meeting with HR was set for a Wednesday afternoon, and the atmosphere in the office felt charged with tension. I spent that morning pacing my apartment, replaying every moment of the last few weeks in my mind. I had confronted Lisa, watched Mark squirm, and taken a stand against their betrayal. But the reality was still heavy. I was about to face the fallout of everything that had transpired. When I arrived at the office, I could see the grim looks on my colleagues' faces as they whispered among themselves. The news had spread like wildfire, and while I didn't want to be the center of attention, I felt a sense of empowerment as I walked through the halls. I was no longer the man who was blind to the deceit behind closed doors. I had taken action, and the truth was finally catching up with those who had wronged me. The meeting was held in a small conference room. I walked in, and both Lisa and Mark were already seated, their expressions a mix of anger and defeat. Claire was there, along with another HR representative, a serious-looking woman named Karen. They exchanged glances as I took my seat, and I could sense the tension crackling in the air. "Thank you all for being here," Claire began, her tone professional. "We've gathered evidence regarding the relationship between Mark and Lisa, and this meeting is to discuss the consequences that will follow." I watched as Lisa shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between Claire and Mark. Mark, on the other hand, wore a defiant expression, as if he thought he could talk his way out of this mess. "First and foremost," Claire continued, "we take matters of workplace relationships very seriously, especially when they involve power dynamics. Mark, your actions have been deemed inappropriate and a violation of company policy." The words hung in the air, and I could see Mark's defiance begin to waver. "This is absurd. I've done nothing wrong," he snapped, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his fear. "Actually, you have," Karen interjected firmly. "We've heard from multiple employees regarding your behavior in the workplace, including advances toward female staff members that were unwanted." Lisa's face flushed, and I wondered if she had any idea how deep Mark's issues ran. It was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that he had put other women in the same position he had put Lisa and me. "Given the evidence we have, Mark," Claire said, her tone unyielding, "the company has decided to terminate your employment effective immediately." There was a moment of stunned silence, and then chaos erupted. Mark slammed his hands on the table, rising to his feet. "You can't do this. I have rights. This is a witch hunt." "Sit down, Mark," Claire commanded, her voice steady. "We will not tolerate outbursts during this meeting." Mark's face twisted in anger, but he reluctantly sat down, the fight draining from him. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction watching him realize that he was losing everything he had taken for granted. As the meeting progressed, Lisa sat silently, her expression shifting from anger to despair. Claire then turned her attention to her. "Lisa, while your involvement in this situation is different, it cannot be overlooked. There are serious ramifications for your actions as well." I could see Lisa's composure break. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I thought it was just a phase," she cried, her voice cracking. "Your choices have consequences, Lisa," Claire stated firmly. "We will provide you with resources to help you transition, but your position with the company will also be terminated." Lisa's face fell, and I could see the horror dawning on her. "But I can change. I'll do anything." There was no denying the heartache in her voice, but I felt a cathartic release. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the repercussions. My heart ached for what we had lost, but I knew I couldn't allow myself to feel pity. I had to focus on my own healing. With the meeting concluded, I stepped outside and took a deep breath. The air felt different, lighter somehow. I had fought back, and I had won. I didn't know what the future held for me, but I was ready to embrace it. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had transpired. The betrayal had cut deep, but it also taught me valuable lessons about trust, respect, and the importance of standing up for myself. I realized that I had the strength to overcome this, to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I moved forward, I focused on my career, reconnecting with friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. I even took up new hobbies, rediscovering passions that had been buried under the weight of betrayal. I knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face whatever came next. In the end, I had learned that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most profound growth. It's easy to get lost in the hurt, but I was determined to emerge stronger. I would take this experience and use it as fuel to create a life filled with authenticity and respect, something I had fought so hard to regain. While Lisa and Mark would have to navigate their own paths now, I was ready to embrace my future with open arms, knowing that I had the strength to forge my own way. Life goes on, and I was more than ready for the next chapter.